Hi, everybody. I hope you can see me today. I'm Susan Jenkins, and I'm the CEO of the Arts and Humanities Council. So before I go on, I just want to see a couple of people, perhaps typing in the chat, letting me know that you can hear me and see me and that we're well on our way. Great. Hi, Michelle. Great to see you. Great. So I know you can hear me. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for turning into today's alternative venues for jazz live streaming event. I'm very excited to be here with you today. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am the CEO of the largest arts and humanities council in the state of Maryland. We are the Arts and Humanities Council of Montgomery County, Maryland. It is an independent 501c3 agency, although we are a non-departmental agency of Montgomery County, Maryland's government. Give you an idea of Montgomery County, Maryland, in case you don't know. We are, at one time, we're considered a bedroom community of Washington, D.C. My home is only about 16 miles from the heart of D.C., and my office is probably about 10 miles from the heart of D.C. So we're just across the line from the District of Columbia to Maryland. And we serve about 500 arts and humanities organizations, about 2,000 individual artists and scholars. So we offer funding, which comes normally from a local arts agency, as well as technical assistance and professional development for artists. So as one of about 5,000 local arts agencies across the nation, this is the work that we do. So, as a businesswoman, as an arts administrator, a creative, and I work in this sector to try to elevate the work that all of you as artists and entrepreneurs do in your work. A little bit about me. I have an MBA, and for many, many years, I worked in the jazz arena. I was first, and in music, at first, I was the CEO of the Rhythm and Blues Foundation. Before that, for a few years, I worked at the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz as a producer for the jazz competition for several years, as well as one of their first chief operations officers. I went from there to running the Rhythm and Blues Foundation. Our mission was to provide emergency financial assistance and public recognition for R&B artists of the 40s and 50s. So before I go on, I'll just see, yep, hey, Willard and Michelle are on, so that's great. So once I left the Rhythm and Blues Foundation, I was recruited by the Recording Industry Association of America, and I became the Senior Vice President of Marketing at RIAA. As I say so many times, the creator has a sense of humor that I'm not always plugged into. So about 30 to 40 days after I started my job at RIAA, I was in charge of marketing for the Recording Industry Association, as well as the director of the Gold and Platinum Record Program. We discovered Napster. And it was a really interesting time to be at the Recording Industry Association in that Napster was a completely different phenomena for the industry. And I worked with the industry to try to figure out our response to it. I was there at RIAA for a little over 2 years. I left there and began work for the inimitable Bruce Lundvall as the CEO of Jazz Alliance International. On our board, we had representatives from almost every sector of the industry, from publicists to artists to record company to um, communications expert, all in the way of thinking about how to elevate market share for jazz. I did that for several years, and then I left there and became an executive in residence at Loyola University in New Orleans, again running the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz graduate program. After I left there, came back to Maryland, and since 2008, again plugged into the creator's sense of humor 30 days after I accepted the job here as CEO of the Arts and Humanities Council. Lehman Brothers failed, And I began my tenure at this agency under the Great Depression. So here we are, 12 years later. And today I just wanted to share with you a few things that I've learned from watching these different economic scenarios and the power that you have as creatives in even what seem as really depressing times. I want to just pause for a second and see whether or not there are any questions. So great. Hi everybody, and thanks. Thanks so much for tuning in today. So one of the things that I learned is that this is the time where creatives can really be in your prime. And what I mean by that is that it gives you an opportunity to just envision what ifs. Right now, technology is an all-time high. I've seen technology and the advances in technology to be greater than I've ever seen before. So one of the things that as a businesswoman and as a creative, I know that is really, really critical is diversifying your funding base. If you have an investment portfolio, or even if you have $5 in the bank, you want to make sure that as you are thinking about your revenue streams as an individual artist, as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, diversifying one's funding base is going to give you the best and most solid foundation from which to build. So if you haven't thought about that before and you were simply working, touring, doing those kinds of gigs, now is an opportunity for you to think about how you can repackage yourself, reimagine yourself as a creative, and offer yourself in different ways, whether that is as an educator, or as someone who is part of a creative team with others, your band, your orchestra, as a composer, as an arranger, or as somebody who's outside of the industry and informing other creative sectors. I have been an adjunct professor at some times during my career, and one of the things that I talk about is how closely aligned jazz is with mathematics, with science, and with the law, in that improvisation helps us get to another solution. And what I know for sure is that you are expert improvisers, and being able to lean into your ability to see through the music, through compositions differently. Use that now to think about how you might reimagine yourself. I'm also an executive coach. And what I do when I talk to my clients is I talk about the three things that I think form our psyche. We know what we know what we don't know. But here's something that's really interesting. We often don't know what we don't know. So by curiosity, by giving yourself license to think about things, to look at things very differently, to be curious and keep asking yourself, what else might I do? What comes up for me there? How does that affect me? How could I change the paradigm? I think paradigms are made after a certain amount of repetition, but that doesn't mean that that paradigm can't change. So perhaps you only had a source of income coming from one place. Now is the time to think about how might you cobble that together. And while that may seem very exhausting in this gig economy, in this gig time, a diversified portfolio is why Warren Buffett doesn't fail. He doesn't fail simply because he has a lot of money. He doesn't fail because the money that he has, he's invested in a way so that his portfolio is diverse enough so that when one part fails, the other part can succeed and balance it out. So I'm going to stop right there and just ask if there's any questions about this piece. All right. I haven't seen any questions. That doesn't mean that there aren't any, but I haven't seen any questions yet. So I'm going to continue. Not only is a diversified portfolio important, but if you don't have a relationship with your local arts council, make one. And I say that because there are some of you who are like, oh no, I don't want to deal with getting government funds. I don't want to deal with that. But we're much more than that. We can offer professional development opportunities. We can offer technical assistant opportunities. And moreover, we might even be able to connect you, say, with private developers or private companies who could use creatives on their team to think about how they may want to come out of this pandemic, how they might want to approach it. Pitching yourself as a creative to join an advertising team, a creative team, a communications team, or even your local government teams could really be a way that you might be able to rethink yourself. Say, a visual artist might be able to talk to their local Department of Transportation to think about how you might want to create some streetscapes. A musical artist might be able to talk to your local government about temporary public art. And temporary public art, we're now calling small concerts, community workshops, venues, that kind of thing. So not only does your local government, your local arts agency, whether they're government or not, provide funding, but they could also help provide these creative connections that you might not have thought about before that can offer you new opportunities for work. And today we'll also hear from a dear colleague of mine, Nina Ozlu-Tunselli, who is the executive director of the Arts Action Fund. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you how important it is to be plugged in to what's going on in your local, state, and government offices. Now, I know a lot of us will eschew the government work altogether, and I do understand that. Trust me, I'm with you. But on the other hand, if there are opportunities for growth, opportunities for changing the way people think about investing in communities of color, traditionally marginalized communities, traditionally disadvantaged communities, artistic adventures. This is a prime time for you to make yourself known to your legislators and to others in your community, community activists, who can help pair you with those who want to do the right thing. And as I say, this is a time where there's lots of paradigm shifts. Get right in there, and if you don't see the paradigm shifting in the direction you want it to go, shift it. Shift will make it happen, as they say. I'll pause right now to see if there's any other questions yet. So, as I said for the beginning, diversifying one's portfolio, and one of the things I wanted to talk about today was that, you know, as well as getting to know what's in your local environment. I want to say that. And also, I'd say the third, think about how you might consider partnering with the businesses that are right in your community. Is there a hardware store that perhaps has an annual meeting that you might want to begin to talk to? Who do they affect in the community? Who might you be able to work with? Here in Montgomery County, there's a place called Smoky Glen, and it's a outdoor barbecue venue. As we were thinking about our annual staff retreat, we thought, well, perhaps we could go to Smoky Glen. Maybe we could even thinking about booking a band. Maybe we could think about having something public. It's a place where we could be socially distanced. I heard from a colleague the other day. I know many of you are doing small local concerts in your neighborhoods, in your communities. That's all really great, but those are one-offs. What I'm talking about is diversifying our portfolios so that you can begin to think about a revenue stream that you can count on over time. So as you cobble together some grants, some private events, perhaps some teaching, perhaps some other way of streaming your content, and then thinking about how you put that all together, you're made a budget for yourself, and you're looking at how you're going to make that nut every day, every month, every week, every year. That diversification will give you an opportunity to do those things. And really, if you are in a place where you are able to ask yourself, what don't I know about this? And you're constantly asking a question like that, it opens your mind up to think about possibilities. And I think right now where we're at is that we need to consider all kinds of possibilities in order to recover from what we know for our sector has been sheer devastation. So I don't want you to think that I don't understand the sheer devastation that has been from hundreds, thousands of canceled tours, canceled contracts, and as a result, what it's done to some relationships. But I'd say this is the time to reach out and make sure that those presenters, those clubs, those opportunities that may have gone by the wayside right now, just reach out and let people know how grateful you were that those opportunities existed at all. And that once things recover and you have no idea what that will mean, ask to be part of the team that thinks about what recovery looks like in your community, in your sphere of influence. And exercise that by showing up and letting them know all that is so great about your creative improvisational mind. All right, I'm going to take a pause right now and see if there's any questions. All right. All right, so here's a great question. For artists that have been making most of their money touring and teaching, what are some of the ways you can branch out? Well, for those of you who are composers, perhaps there are ways for you to think about how to shop your work to schools and others who may want to think about that. I think also you might want to think about those who have been teaching, and we see, especially I see the community college in my neighborhood has just not even stopped. The president of our college is just so incredibly fantastic, Dr. Darian Pollard. And I want to just call her name because I think that she is going to be a star in community colleges nationwide. She already is, and she'll even be elevated greater after the pandemic. So I think, going out to those music departments and talking to them about what they need, what can you do to augment their work. I think also, as I say, looking in your community and looking at ways that you've always said to yourself, it would be interesting if they did X, Y, and Z over there. Just opening yourself up to possibilities. Touring and teaching were one way that you made a living before, but there may be other opportunities for you to use your creative juices, whether that is thinking of yourself as support for musicians that are coming out of school. What kind of support do they have on the other side? Is there something more formal that you might be able to do with that school and those students in helping them reimagine themselves? Are there things you've learned that you could do that you could offer those communities? And again, asking your local community what it is that they need. One of the things that I'm really proud of that my organization and my board has done is that we are facing racial equity face on, head on, heart on. We have three basic racial equity principles that we've been sharing with the public for the last year. Those three are quite simple but very deep. One is that we are committed to brave conversations about race and equity. And I bring this up as I answer the question because if you have seen inequities in your community, now is the time for you to address those and talk to those people in power to help them help you understand how you can help the community. The second racial equity principle is that we are committed to sharing power. This is the time that you can begin to talk to people in your spheres of influence about how your knowledge can be leveraged to help them meet their goals. So when we talk about sharing power, it is moving power from, say, the traditional presenter to the artist and helping the presenter understand how an artist can help them get to their audiences better. And I think the third and one of the most important, to me, is the tenet that comes out of the disability community is that nothing about us without us can be for us. I'm going to say that again. Nothing about us without us can be for us. So just this understanding that if you are really going to represent your community, you have got to find out exactly what the community wants, and you have to be able to deliver it in a way that the community has asked for it. So I think that there's a lot of information that one could glean right now about all of our respective communities. I'll tell you a personal anecdote. Years ago, when I first took this position, my colleague at Arts Midwest told me that, David Freyer, in fact, told me that they were touring a Mongolian throat singing group in the East, and they wanted me to present it. Hmm. I kind of scratched my head. I mean, I've come out of the R&B and jazz communities, and I don't know, Mongolian throat singers. That was going to be new. But I am open. I'm an open creative. So I said, okay, let me try it. I had no idea what I'd do. So I went to the community college and I said, I got some Mongolian throat singers and I don't have any money. What can you do? And the college said, well, we've never had that before. So we're happy to host you for free. Well, they not only hosted it for free, and I was quite surprised when the throat singers showed up and put up a yurt on the stage. But I'll tell you, my real surprise came when once we opened the doors for that $5 concert, that it ended up to be standing room only. Why? Because Montgomery County, Maryland has NIH and Bethesda Institutes of Health. We have many, many, many scientists who are here on political asylum, who work for National Institutes of Health, many of them Chinese, who had never seen Mongolian throat singers outside of their home country. People came from New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware to see that $5 concert. It was a sellout. It taught me one thing. Don't make assumptions. We have no idea what our community wants unless we ask them. And this is a great opportunity for creatives. Spend some time now. Understand the demographics of your community. Understand what the people want, and then give it to them. All right, I'm going to stop and see if anybody else has any other questions. Great, Estrella, you're right. You have to think about new ways to reinvent yourself and staying in touch with theater directors, booking agents, everybody that's in your sphere of influence and saying, what problem are you trying to solve? How can I help you? You know, adding yourself as a value added, that you're there. Yes, it would be nice if you got a gig, but what other things might you do? And I think that when you offer your support in this way, to presenters or to your community or to legislators, you end up making the kinds of relationships that are the long tail. Maybe it's not billions of dollars at once, but I can think of a festival right here in Maryland that Monty Alexander befriended the director, and now they said, hey, we'll name the festival after you. And every Labor Day for many years, they've hosted this festival. Monty Alexander is not from this area, but he brings something that this little community wants, and he's been able to build it into something else. What might you do if there were no strings attached to what you could create? I think the possibilities are endless. Well, we're coming down to just a few more minutes before I introduce my good friend, Nina Oslu-Tanselli, who I met when I was Senior VP at the Recording Industry Association. And I took that job because I really wanted to understand what indeed was in the minds of people in the record industry. How did it work? I wanted to peer behind the curtain and see it. I had no idea that I would get the look I got, and I soon realized after a couple of years that it wasn't exactly right for me, but I did learn a lot about the industry. And as a result, I've developed great relationships with many of my colleagues. One of my colleagues is now the head of Viacom for their legal department, and the other is, for the Gaming Institute. So these are colleagues that I've met. I had no idea who I would meet when I took that gig, and I had no idea what it would mean for me professionally. But I'll tell you that over the 20 years since I left the Recording Industry Association, it's been really great to be able to dial up these contacts and be able to leverage them for the things I've needed. As I said, I met Nina during that time, and I'm hoping that later on in the year we might be able to bring some of the other colleagues that I've met over time that can also talk to us about problem solving, diversifying our funding base, and becoming really strong entrepreneurs. Whether you're just an individual artist, whether or not you have an LLC with one or another or a few other people, or whether or not you work for an institution and you do work for them. No matter where you come from, I think opening yourself up to new possibilities by asking yourself, what would you do if there were no constraints on your brain, can really bode well for you during this time. I'll stop, see if there's any more questions before I turn it over. I think go off, right, Gail? And then Nina comes on. However it works. I only have about 2 or 3 more minutes. Oh, so here's a great question. How important do you think recording albums is these days? So I'm going to ask you, Dana, what is the recording for? I think that we've known that for quite some time. Um, uh, Certainly for the 20 years since I've left RIAA and before, market share for jazz recordings has always been very, very small. And I think it's probably not much bigger than the 1 or 2% that it was when I left 20 years ago. So the question is, Dana, what is it for? If the recording is your calling card, and if this is something that you are able to hand out when you give live performances so that you're able to take advantage and you have merchandise right in the moment that you can market, that's great. But oftentimes, if you go through a major label, there's a lot of expenses associated with that recording. That means that you may not recoup your investment, not to mention realize a profit for some time. So I think it's really critical that you and your audience understand what the recording is for. Is it to market yourself so that you are able to get presenters interested in your work and then sell that work at those live recordings? Do you expect that your recordings are just going to be on the shelf and that you're hoping that you're going to get income from that? And that's pretty unlikely. Do you hope that you're able to record records that you then stream and you have a very active base who would be able and willing to pay? So it really depends what the purpose is for your recording and how you plan to use it versus whether or not it's important or not. I think it's a really important question to ask, and it's an important question to answer from a very personal standpoint. Let's see. Okay. So I only have 1 more minute. I don't really see any other questions. Gail, am I missing any question? I don't think so. So it's 5:29. It's been absolutely wonderful. I've appreciated the opportunity to be with you today. I love you all madly, and I look forward to being together, whether it's virtual or in person, as soon as we are able. Wishing you lots of peace. Bye.